All right, hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Star Wars Mark of Balance. My name is Mark, and today I really want to talk to you guys about Solo, a Star Wars story. I had just recently rewatched it after not having seen it since I saw it in the theater back in 2018, making it the only Star Wars film I had never rewatched, which is a rarity, and I have no idea what came over me the day I did rewatch it. I was like, I feel like I need to watch Solo again. I'm in the mood to watch Solo again. And I got to admit, I was pretty excited to rewatch it because it felt like a new experience. And after having rewatched Solo, I can definitively say that Solo, a Star Wars story, is Coleslaw. I want to let that hang there for a second and let you think about that. I like Coleslaw, and I would say most people probably do too. Even people that don't like it don't really mind it. But you never order coleslaw. You never go out of your way to get coleslaw. It's just a thing that comes out with your meal, and you don't expect it. And you're like, oh, that's nice. I'm going to dig into that coleslaw between my burger and my fries. But it doesn't add anything to the meal. You never talk to someone afterwards and say, you know what was the real superstar of that meal? The coleslaw. It could be the best coleslaw in the world. You are never going to bring it up to anyone you know because it doesn't add anything. It certainly doesn't fill you up. You never say, "Ooh, I can't have another bite of that burger because, boy, this coleslaw is going down nice and it is filling me up." No, you don't do that. No one has ever done that. That is actually a thing that has never happened on this earth. And I think that absurd comparison perfectly encapsulates what Solo, a Star Wars story is. It doesn't add anything to Star Wars, but it also doesn't take anything away from Star Wars. You can have Star Wars as a meal and you have Solo on the side, and that's just fine. I'll have some Solo slaw once in a while if it's ever on. I'll watch, no problem. But coleslaw can never be a main course. Coleslaw can never be an entree or even an appetizer. Can't be just a bowl of coleslaw. So while I look at Rogue One maybe more like an appetizer, nice supreme nachos, some wings, maybe some spin dip, all of those things pretty substantial. And if you wanted to, you could live off them. But you're not getting a coleslaw appetizer. It's not going to satisfy you. Okay, I'll get a little more serious and analytical here, but I thought that was a fun comparison because I think it is pretty accurate and surmises my thoughts on Solo and kind of confirms what I always thought of Solo when I first saw it and why I never felt the need to rewatch it. It's just there's a lack of it justifying its existence. And that doesn't come down to Alden Ehrenreich giving a bad performance. I really, really love Alden Ehrenreich in the movie, but he's not Han Solo. Never in the movie do I ever feel convinced that I'm watching Han Solo. That just comes down to the fact that he's not Harrison Ford. It was an impossible ask for him to play Han Solo. I love that he made it his own, but he came across more as another smuggler, just another person in the galaxy. And I think if this movie was just a story about someone from a backwater world and they kind of get wrapped up in the criminal underworld and they start to make a name for himself and they start to make their own way in the galaxy, I think that would have made this movie 10 times better. But I think because there was this expectation that this was a Solo story, no pun intended, that it was tied to Harrison Ford's performance and Han Solo as this juggernaut of a character, I think that made it very unfair for the movie to overcome those odds, even though, you never tell him the odds. When you really think about all the things in this movie that make it a Han Solo story, it really only comes down to like two scenes, and it's the Kessel Run and Chewbacca. Those are the two things that make this story Han Solo's story. But outside that, it could have just been an underworld story set in the Star Wars galaxy. And other than the high expectations, my only complaints about this movie come down to two other things. One, the scene where they give Han Solo his last name. The Imperial officer giving him the last name Solo because he doesn't have a last name or a people, and it's because he's rolling solo. He says, "You'll be Han Solo." Like, who is this guy? Is he practicing his stand-up comedian act as an Imperial officer at the drafting board? Like, what? Why is an Imperial officer being the one to give Han Solo his last name? I mean, it's corny any way you put it. If Han was doing this whole thing and in the end he ends up alone, he's like, I'm taking the name Solo. Like, that would have been terrible too, but an Imperial officer giving him the name, I think that is just really, really stupid. And the other thing is the manufactured arc for Han. I enjoy the lessons he learns here from Kira and Beckett, Woody Harrelson's character, that you can't trust anyone in this world. You have to be out there for yourself. Like, I enjoy that, and I think the ending of the movie does a great job of conveying that. But in the end of the movie, they try to make Han Solo face himself from a moral standpoint and say, oh, I'm not a good person, but he ends up doing the right thing by helping Enfys Nest and funding the rebellion by getting them the coaxium. But throughout the movie, there's never any moment where Han Solo isn't the good guy. Like, he is always making the right decisions. Like, of course, he's a street rat and he stole speeders and he probably did some criminal things as a kid, but that was survival. But he never comes across as a bad guy. There's never any gray moments where he does anything where you're like, oh, that was kind of dark. Oh, that was a bad thing for him to do. It never really dips its toes into there. So when in the end he's like, oh, I'm not a good guy, like, oh, I wouldn't do this because I don't really care about any causes or being a good person, it kind of falls flat because he was never a bad person, if that makes sense. And I get maybe there's an argument to be had that he has this self-image that is negative, where he doesn't think he's a good person. But it would have been interesting to see him actually do something morally questionable. Maybe if they made another Solo movie, they would explore that more. You know, maybe he becomes more jaded after this experience with Beckett and Kira, and maybe then you would be like, oh, okay, yeah, he has done some questionable things, and I'm sure he does. But in this movie, they try and make this arc that I don't think comes full circle. And the disjointed arc may come from the fact that they had multiple directors. They went from the partners who did the Lego movie, I think Phil Lord or Chris Lord, and then they moved on to Ron Howard. And when you have a change in leadership, I'm sure there were some rewrites, some new directions that were taken. So I get it that might have also gotten lost in the transition. But again, you have to judge the movie for the state that it's released in. Rogue One had plenty of reshoots and rewrites, and it ended up being a really great film. So you kind of got to be fair across the board there. So those are really my big complaints about the movie. Again, Alden Ehrenreich was never the problem, is not the problem. He had an impossible task. I think the manufactured arc for Han Solo came secondary to the overall fun adventure feel of the movie, which is fine. It definitely succeeded in feeling like a very fast-paced summer blockbuster space adventure movie with the element of heist and betrayal. Like, all of that was great. But I think the thematic aspects of it didn't live up to the Star Wars name, because Star Wars, I think, is one of the most impressive thematic franchises out there, and that's what's made it survive for so long. And I don't think this movie really advances that or even comes up to the level that we would consider the baseline for Star Wars. And because I talked about Alden and his portrayal of a legacy character, I do have to touch on Childish Gambino as Lando Calrissian, and where Alden makes the character his own, almost to a point where he isn't Han Solo. He's a whole new character in the Star Wars galaxy. I think Donald took the exact opposite approach and went for an impression of Billy D. Williams as Lando Calrissian. And I think Donald has the talent, he has the charm, he has the charisma to play the role of Lando. Again, I don't support the recasting and all this stuff, but playing devil's advocate, I'll go along with it. But for me, when he does this impression of Billy D. Williams, his accent, I feel, like fades in and out depending on the scene. And it's something I noticed when I first watched it, and I saw it again when I watched it this time, and I don't think anyone has ever talked about it. So maybe it's just in my head, and maybe it's the nuance of the accent. It comes in and out, maybe because Lando is a schemer. He kind of plays up his regalness in some scenes, and then in other scenes he comes back down to earth. Like, it's almost a sham. It's a fake accent to act more dignified than he actually is. And that would be, maybe I just figured it out. Maybe that was what he was going for, and he's actually a genius, and that's such a cool way to build the character and the character's voice. But for me, I felt it was just weird watching it. But yeah, now that I think about it after going through that exercise with you guys, I think that makes a lot of sense, because then when he finally assumes the role of Lando on Bespin, he is the dignitary for Cloud City. Hmm. I don't know. I still don't love the impression of Billy D. Williams in the movie, and the accent throws me off. So I'm just gonna stick with that. But I would be curious to hear your guys' thoughts on Donald's performance as Lando Calrissian. And we just got news that he and I think his brother are going to be taking over as the script writers for the Lando Disney Plus series that was announced so many years ago, and apparently it still exists and is still going to happen. Again, am I supportive of that? I don't think so. Again, I don't like when they recast legacy characters to play characters in the same time period as the original actors played them. Case in point, Alec Guinness and Ewan McGregor playing Obi-Wan at two different time periods in the character's life. I think that's much different than Alden or Donald playing Han and Lando like 3 or 4 years before we meet them in the original trilogy. I just don't like how that lines up. I think it makes the continuity very difficult for casual fans to get into, because we all know as Star Wars fans that Star Wars timelines are crazy and extremely confusing, because we jump from future to past. We do a sequel of a prequel and a prequel of a sequel. And for a casual fan that's like, okay, what time period are we in? Oh, there's Harrison Ford. Oh, there's Carrie Fisher. Okay, I know where we're at. If there's no stormtroopers on screen, okay, I can do it based on the actors. But now if we're saying, oh, well, that's also Han Solo, now you're like, okay, now wait a minute. What time period are we in? For the diehard fans, for everyone that's listening to this podcast, we're probably going to get it. We'll figure it out with context clues. But I always think about the casual Star Wars fan, because I want Star Wars fans and casual Star Wars fans to become bigger Star Wars fans. And I feel like when the barrier to entry is much higher, it makes that process difficult and unfortunate, because I think it's such a rich galaxy, and I don't like when there's things that prevent people from enjoying it. So I don't support the recast, but they're here and they're happening for Lando and Han. And I know there's rumors that Alden will come back as Han in Dave Filoni's movie. I don't know if that's true. I don't think original trilogy characters should be in Dave Filoni's film, because I feel like Thrawn and that whole thing should happen outside of the known galaxy, because no one ever talks about this galactic conflict that happens between episode 6 and 7 with Thrawn in the sequel trilogy. So I feel like it would be weird if that was just a thing that happened that no one ever talks about again. So kind of got off track there from Solo, but I think all of that was very relevant. But I think those are all my negatives. Like, I really did enjoy this rewatch. It was fun. I really like Emilia Clarke's character as Kira. I think she plays this very interesting role of someone that comes from the same place as Han and does what she needs to survive in this world, in this underground world that they both grew up in. And she kind of represents what could have happened to Han if he got mixed in with the wrong people, which of course he does, but she becomes subservient to Crimson Dawn, and whether it's a fear of being killed if she tries to leave, or an obligation to them for saving her and giving her purpose in life, all of that is very interesting. She occupies this very morally gray zone where you can't fault her for doing terrible things, but you can also say that she does have choices to leave, and Han was that out for her, and she didn't take it in the end. And I really like how the movie ends off in this very sinister tone of her and Han kind of seeing each other from two different sides of the world as she stays behind. And that connection really works because I think Alden and Amelia had really great chemistry on screen. It didn't feel forced or anything like that. I really enjoyed their time together on screen. I almost would have liked to see maybe some more time when they were kids. Like, that would have been cool to see what other things they got into, and maybe that would have made the ending a bit more emotional. But I really think what they did with their time was great. And I'm obviously a huge fan of Woody Harrelson, and I love his character of Beckett. He plays Woody Harrelson like it's exactly who you'd expect his character to be. And I think he is a really cool mentor to have in Star Wars for Han. And I like the lessons he teaches him. And in the end, you see that he is proud of what Han Solo has become and that he took his lessons to heart. Paul Bettany was great as the villain, Dryden Voss, I think his name was. He's really cool, the character design itself, and he's super sinister. He has that regal feeling of an underworld boss, that he's sophisticated, but again, he gets his hands dirty. And I like his blade brass knuckles. Those were really cool. And Having said that, there's a lot of big named actors in this movie, and you guys know my golden rule. I think I talked about it in like the first episode of this podcast. Star Wars can't have too many big name actors in the projects. They just can't. Star Wars succeeded because it had actors and actresses that were relatively unknown or they were up and coming talent, and this was their big break. And that's what made it feel immersive, that you didn't know these characters or these people that played these characters, and you were like, oh wow, that feels like they're them. Unfortunately, that leads to typecasting for these actors like Hayden Christensen, Mark Hamill, even Daisy Ridley to a point, but it also gives a lot of opportunity to new actors that can then blow up after it, like Harrison Ford, like Ewan McGregor, like Natalie Portman, like Adam Driver, like Oscar Isaac. All of them are huge names now, and at the time they were getting bigger, but those movies absolutely blew them up, and now they're in everything. I mean, Adam Driver, Oscar Isaac, and even John Boyega, he's doing a really good job on his own as well. All of them are huge actors now, and at the time, I didn't even know who Adam Driver was. He was doing like indie movies. Same with Oscar Isaac. They were all talented, but man, nobody really knew them except for like maybe one or two big projects. So, of course, is it nice to see Woody Harrelson, Emilia Clarke, Alden Ehrenreich, Donald Glover, Paul Bettany all in Star Wars? Yeah, that's really cool. And they all did a great job. Like, again, I really enjoyed their characters. But it's a golden rule. And if you see a Star Wars project with too many big actors in it, know that they're making up for something by putting them in it. Just know there's a reason why they're doing that, because most projects do not do that in the Star Wars universe. All right, so other things I liked, I really enjoyed the interpolation of the original scores by John Williams, by John Powell here. I know I talked about it a little on my Music Monday story on my Instagram, but a lot of the music in this movie takes from those themes of the original trilogy and weaves some of those melodies in and out of these original pieces that are done by John Powell. And I think it does a beautiful job of making that soundscape here. And I really appreciated it, especially the scene where the Millennium Falcon is shown for the first time. We have this blown up version of the Star Wars main title theme, and I absolutely love it. And there are some other original pieces. I do want to give John Powell some credit. Like, he didn't just copy and paste John Williams' work. There are some really good pieces in here, like the Lando closet theme, I think, is one of them, when Han and Kira are in his closet surrounded by the capes. There's a really great musical score for that scene as well. So I do have to say the score this time around, I definitely noticed more. The other thing was the aesthetic. I really appreciated how well this movie was shot and the visual effects, the practical effects, but also I liked the use of the colors blue and yellow. It was like a consistent theme that gave the movie a nice uniformity and a through line. And I know, big movies do that all the time. Like, I'm not saying anything crazy here, but I think in this movie, like, there was a very big emphasis on those two colors. I mean, we have Dryden Voss's ship is this gold and black, like yellow is a big color for that. Then we have Kessel, which is this yellowish orange. We have hyperspace blue. We have Lando usually in his blue and yellow cape. I know I'm just saying colors, but I feel like there was a nice use of color and aesthetic for this movie that, again, I didn't appreciate the first time through. One underrated part of the movie was when Han was in the Imperial military and he was on that mud planet, and it was basically like World War One. It was trench warfare, but that aesthetic and that fight overall was really cool to see, because we don't really see a lot of the Imperial conquests of the original trilogy or before the original trilogy. I mean, we see usually the after effects, like in Andor, we see that culture is destroyed, the one that celebrates the eye. We see in Rebels that Lothal is already kind of taken over, but we never see that initial fighting between the local militia and the Imperials, and I think it was really cool to see that here. And I love when Han is like, the Imperial officer says, they're the enemies, we have to push them back, and Han's like, well, we're the enemies, we're on their world, and he kind of gets reprimanded for that. But yeah, I love the aesthetic of the world, the clouds and the destruction. I think there's this really amazing shot of it from the atmosphere above, and you see like they're bombarding the planet, and it's like an all-out war. And I just think it was like really underrated, and I kind of wish we saw a little bit more of that in Star Wars. And I think the last thing I want to talk about in this movie, because I feel like I've kind of been all over the place in this episode, and it's just kind of been a stream of consciousness talking about this movie and my experience with it again. But I do really enjoy the ending of this movie and the twists and turns of the last 30 minutes. Like, I really appreciate everything that happens. I don't think it's contrived or anything like that. And I'm not saying it's like Seven or Inception with its twists and turns, but I think for a heist movie, it has these really cool ideas. Like, I really enjoy that they go to Dryden Voss's place with the actual coaxium, knowing that they probably got betrayed by Beckett. And you have this scene where he's looking at it and he's like, "How did you fake the coaxium?" And Han's like, "What do you mean? That's the actual coaxium." And, you know, from the audience standpoint, you're like, oh, Alden's kind of playing this really well. Like, oh no, we're found out. We got to just play it off. But he was actually telling the truth. Like, that was the actual coaxium. And Beckett comes in like he pulled off the perfect betrayal. But then Alden's like, you told me not to trust people. And that's exactly what I did. And then Kira looks like she's going to be on his side. And then she betrays him and says, oh no, I'm not coming with you. I have to stay. You go. And I think of the best heist movies out there, like Ocean's 11. And I think these twists and turns in this movie are right on par or right below that. And those are seen as like the pinnacle of heist movies. So got to give it to Solo for holding its own in that department when it comes to heist movies. So did I have a good time rewatching Solo? Yes. Do I think my opinions on it changed very much as a project? No, but I do appreciate some more pieces of it than I did the first time around. Am I on the train of people that are hashtagging Make Solo 2 happen? No, I will not be on that train, and I will never be on that train. Would I like to see Alden in more Star Wars projects? Definitely. Unfortunately, he is locked in as Solo, and that's just what I have to live with. If I do want to see him again in Star Wars, it's going to be as Han Solo, which is a bummer. It goes against my morals. It goes against what I believe in. But I did enjoy him here. I think the movie would have been 10 times better if it was just a story of a kid who wanted to make it in the galaxy or survive in this galaxy, and he does whatever he has to fulfill his dreams of being a pilot or whatever. I think that would have been much more compelling and would have taken away the unrealistic expectation placed on this movie. And because Solo, A Star Wars Story, is, as I mentioned in the beginning, Coleslaw, I do want to reward this movie, before I end this episode, with the honor of moving up one spot on my Star Wars movie rankings, officially eclipsing Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker, which I think does terrible damage to Star Wars and the themes that were established throughout the movies and TV shows, and for Solo being completely inoffensive and owning its Coleslaw status as not being necessary, not affecting anything, not adding anything, but just being there on my plate. And for that, Solo, you have earned the number 11 spot on my Star Wars movie rankings. So congratulations, Solo. You have beat out a mainline Star Wars saga film. And for that, you should be proud. So that wraps up this episode. Thank you guys so much for listening. I want to hear your guys' thoughts on Solo, A Star Wars Story. I know for some of my guests that I've had on for my Star Wars Story interviews, they've had it highly ranked in some instances, or at least higher ranked than I ever had. And now I can see a little bit of their perspective, and I get it to a degree. And it's an important lesson for all of you to be open-minded and give things a chance again. So with that, follow me on Instagram at @star_wars_mark of balance. Subscribe to the podcast on Spotify, Apple, wherever you get this podcast. Leave a review. It means the world to me. Tell your friends who enjoy Star Wars, or if they're just getting into Star Wars, tell them about the podcast. Word of mouth is the best way for me to reach more people. So I really appreciate all the support. And as always, stay safe, stay healthy, and may the Force be with you. Peace.